What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, joining me as he always does for another episode of the UNC Football Show. It's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, I know I say this pretty much every episode, and I'm going to say it again. We got a really action-packed and exciting show ahead in a lot of ways because there's just a lot of stuff to talk about, especially when you consider it's February 1st, and we're here to, talk about a jam-packed amount of stuff in regards to football. We're going to talk about the schedule here in a second. You talked to Mac, Jason Jones, new cornerbacks coach, as well as all the transfers on Monday. So we're going to hit on that a little bit later. We're also going to hit on some things about spring practice and the spring game as well a little bit later on. But let's start with the 2023 football schedule. Was announced on Monday night. I'm going to do a quick run through of it. Then I'm going to read Mac Brown's quote on it. Then I'm going to kick it to you because I do want to kind of dissect this a little bit. And real quick, let me preface this. We were going to do a podcast on Monday or Tuesday about this, but there were so many things to talk about that we were like, you know what, let's just kind of group it all into a UNC football show. Yeah. Have a little bit longer one and just have a long form discussion on everything. So I'm going to read out the schedule. I'll pop it up on the screen as well. September 2nd kicks off South Carolina in Charlotte, followed by App State in Minnesota. Then you've got at Pittsburgh, and following that is an open week, open week of the season for Carolina, followed by 3 consecutive home games, Syracuse, Miami, and UVA in October. Final game of October is October 28th at Georgia Tech. And then you've got Campbell and Duke at home, followed by Clemson and NC State on the road to cap off the season, which perfect segue into Mac Brown's quote that he talked about on Monday before the schedule came out, frustrations with it, for lack of a better word. And to quote Mac, he said, when you see the ACC schedule tonight, you'll see they didn't do us any favors. It's really, really difficult. We start tough and we finish with an unbelievably tough schedule. So I'm disappointed. I told them I didn't like it. And then referring to the ACC, I didn't think it was fair, but it is what it is. And that's what we've got. And AJ, he's completely right in terms of an aspect of that is we start tough and we finish tough. Because they do. Neutral site game against South Carolina to open the year. South Carolina's, I think they're going to be really good next season. I had a pretty good last season under Shane Beamer as well. I think they're kind of on the up and up. Then at Clemson and at NC State to end the year, and you even got Duke before that at home on senior day. So when you saw the schedule come out, and I know you had already heard Mac Brown's press conference because you were there before it, it was pretty easy and evident to know exactly what he was referring to in that. But what are your overall thoughts about the schedule? Because for me, I think overall it's pretty favorable in a lot of ways when you really dissect it, but it is a tough start and it is a tough finish to the year. I don't think anybody would argue that.
Yeah, when we talked to Mac, he couldn't say, hey, we got to close at Clemson. He had to bite his tongue on that. Yeah. He had to wait because the league would have, come down hard on him, obviously, because the schedule was being released later. Well, okay, it is tough late. That's sort of a tough draw getting at Clemson and at State, and I'll hit on that in a minute. The tough part at the beginning, though, that's their doing. That's the non-conference schedule.
They chose to do that, yeah.
They agreed to go to play South Carolina and Charlotte, which, by the way, the 2 times they've done that before in the regular season to open seasons in 2015 and 2019, they didn't come close to selling the place out. So I don't know why they're going back again. I think that Carolina should have to go to Columbia and then South Carolina come up to Chapel Hill. That's what they should do in this series. If they don't sell it out now with Drake May versus Spencer Rattler and with so much optimism in the South Carolina program and with North Carolina, I think the optimism will build by the time the season comes. And this being a very crucial year for Mac with year 5 coming up, if they don't sell it out or come close to selling it out, they should never, ever have those 2 teams play each other in that stadium ever again.
Agreed.
Because if you can't do it now, then you're never going to be able to do it, in my opinion. And then App State, they got to play App. They had the 2-for-1 deal that they made with App. I don't think after this game, I don't think they should ever play them again. I don't think there's any need to play in-state schools. Although you might want to play ECU once, since the last 3 times North Carolina played ECU, they got their derriere handed to them.
They need to.
So they might want to beat them and host them in Chapel Hill, beat them, and settle the score and move on. Yeah. You shouldn't play the in-state schools. Like Mercer later on. That's ridiculous. It should not. I drove by Mercer's football stadium 2 years ago, and that program, and no disrespect to them, should never play a Power 5, period.
No.
It just doesn't make any sense at all. And then Minnesota, that's a game that's been on the schedule for a while. They go to Minnesota in 24, I believe it is. I think that's great. That's actually what you want in your schedule. So as I dive into this, Jacob, and I wrote a column about it the other day, I think the schedule's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way it lays out is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mac's own words, when they got Oregon in the Holiday Bowl, and I'm paraphrasing, that's who we wanted. We want to play the best team possible. We need to play teams like this in order to take the next step. So you got an ACC schedule that I think gives them an opportunity to accumulate some credibility early. If they beat South Carolina and 2 weeks later beat a Big Ten team in Minnesota that's pretty good and well coached, and plus they beat App in the middle there, then they go to Pitt. And they have a chance to get a really good early. They can accumulate 4 wins through the first 4 weeks that the aggregate of it is better than anybody else has in the country. Mm-hmm. They have an opportunity to do that. Then they get a week to lick their wounds and get healthy and figure out what needs adjusting and do the reevaluation and all that kind of stuff. And then they launch into it with 3 home games.
Yeah.
And then they go to Georgia Tech, which I know Georgia Tech's beaten them the last 2 years, but Carolina never should not have lost either one of those games. They were a better team, but they just didn't prepare well and weren't ready to go either time. So you think that shouldn't be an issue. And then they get Mercer. So from the time that they come back from the Pittsburgh game to the time that they host Duke, and Duke's expected to be a top 4 or 5 team in the league this year by a lot of people, that's almost 2 months. And their biggest challenge is Miami at home. Miami's been a roller coaster, mostly.
It's always a toss up on how good they're actually.
Georgia Tech on the road. Georgia Tech with a new coach on the road. I mean, I don't think that Carolina leaves the state of North Carolina 3 times.
I know. It's only 4 away games, 4 true away games. That's it.
And then they go to Clemson and they go to NC State. Well, if they win the first 4, they're going to generate a lot of credibility that will stay with them. It'll be the reverse of what's happening with basketball right now. Basketball has been judged. They lost 4 in a row. They fell out of the rankings, quickest for number 1, preseason number 1 ever. They were judged, and no one's going to budge anytime soon. That's why they're not ranked. The narrative is set by a lot of the people who create narratives, right? Now, football has a chance to, wow, they beat Spencer Rattler. He picked them off twice with that new defense, new cornerbacks coach. And then they beat App State, which is going to generate a little bit of positive attention. Then they beat Minnesota. If they go up and win at Pitt, 4-0, going into an open date, that means they go into October unbeaten with 4 really good, solid wins. And that means that when they blow through, let's say they blow through that middle part of the schedule, they've already accumulated credibility. And all it does is build toward the end of the season when they go to Clemson and go to State, and they have an opportunity to make those huge, huge games. Because I think State with Bernard Armstrong is going to be really good. Clemson obviously is Clemson. So, and then you have the ACC championship, or it could be a rematch with Clemson. Who knows? It could be a meeting with Florida State. Yeah. So I think the schedule is really good. I get why Mac is complaining. I don't think it was probably the wisest thing to go public with it in the manner he did. He's been taking a beating for it.
I was going to ask you about that.
Because just play the schedule.
Yeah, I don't think it's that bad.
To say that it's not fair, go to Clemson and go to State. There's if they want to be, look, I think Mac is a brilliant messenger. And I believe that maybe his number 1 attribute is that he is a great messenger for the program. Yeah. The mistake here, though, is that it doesn't jive with what he said about playing Oregon in the bowl game and wanting to play teams like that. It also doesn't fully jive with the whole notion that, he came back here to make North Carolina nationally relevant. Well, if you're going to be nationally relevant, you got to stack up and play games like that. And play in back-to-back weeks and show that the program has taken a giant step forward. Go down to Death Valley, and if you can somehow get a win down there, then you got to get it back up and go over to that hornet's nest over in Raleigh. To me, that's what you want in college football. That's what some teams in other leagues have to deal with sometimes. So the ACC has presented an opportunity to have that kind of track. So if they get through it, they're going to be so well positioned. Nobody could question their schedule. Nobody could question their credibility. They can position themselves to do some special things. Now, I'm not saying this team's going to do that. I'm just speaking with respect to the schedule. I think the schedule works out really, really well for them. And it's not ideal to play those last 2 games like that. It'd be better maybe to play Clemson at the end of October or something.
Yeah.
But whatever. I mean, if you're good enough, he said a few times here in the last month and a half or month since the bowl game, I didn't come back to North Carolina and win 9 games. Okay. So you want to be nationally relevant and win more than 9. If you go 10-2 against this schedule, that means you got some good wins. If you do better than that, means you have some good wins and maybe some great wins. And that means you're doing what you came back to do. This schedule is perfect for year 5. It gives him a platform to achieve many of the things he set out to achieve when he came back for part 2.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because you said in the beginning, with the non-conference schedule, that's their undoing. That's their fault. If you didn't want to play all these good teams in non-conference, then why the heck did you schedule? I don't want to hear anything about that. And I think it's as simple as this, AJ. I think if you flip that, let's say you flip the Campbell and Clemson game. Let's say you play Duke, Campbell, NC State, and then you play Georgia Tech at Clemson. I don't think Mac Brown says that. I mean, I really don't. I think it's really that simple. I think it's as simple as that. But I do agree that when you look at the comment, and that's you talked about it there. I was going to ask you about what did you kind of make of his comments, because a lot of people on Twitter are kind of dragging him through the mud for it, and I get it, because I think you look at the away games, okay, right? Clemson, NC State at the end of the year, they're obviously tough games. You know you're going to State every year. It flip-flop back and forth. You know, you can't hide away from that. When they play State the last last regular season game of the year every year, it's always going to be there. But at Clemson is going to be tough, no doubt about it. But you got at Pittsburgh and at Georgia Tech. Those are your only other 2 true road games. I mean, going to Atlanta to play a Georgia Tech team who, you know, has hired their interim coach that beat Carolina at home last year, 2 straight losses. They shouldn't be losing to Georgia Tech. It's that simple. It's not a game that they should go down and lose. And then at Pittsburgh, I know Pittsburgh's usually pretty good in the Coastal, now that the Coastal and Atlantic are gone, obviously. But I mean, when you look at just 4 true away games, you're only going out of the state, 1, 2, 3 times. And one of those trips is down to Clemson, which isn't that far away. I mean, I think when you look at it that way, 7 home games, 4 away, it's just, I really do think it's as simple as if you just flip the Campbell and Clemson games, I don't think Mac Brown makes that comment, but I didn't really agree with his comments, kind of like you're saying. He's talked about wanting to build a program. He's talked about wanting to play in these big games and win these big games. And okay, we're going to give you Duke, Clemson, and State. And then you're like, well, I don't like that. You know, I don't want to play those games. I don't agree with the schedule. And I just don't think it sets necessarily a great tone going into the year. Who knows what he's saying behind the scenes to his team?
He said that he said he told the team that.
It's interesting because to me, that's unlike Mac Brown in some ways.
They were going to send something out to the players a little bit before the media got it with the schedule. Look, he's a master messenger.
That's why I'm surprised he said it. He's
a master messenger, and I have so much respect for his ability to deliver the right message.
He's great at it.
I sometimes I almost want to think, okay, I should step back and really, really parse these words and try to figure out if there's something else there to it. And some people are saying, and our Twitter feed has just been a wreck ever since I tweeted that. I tweeted it out during the press conference, and it's been a wreck ever since, and it continues to be because my phone literally is lighting up as we do this, and it's the people commenting in that Twitter thread. I think that the right approach would be to embrace it. Look at this great opportunity.
Yeah.
North Carolina needs to have degree of difficulty raised in football in order to appropriately scale that mountain, so to speak. So there are if North Carolina had the same schedule it had this past year, let's say they don't lose to Georgia Tech and they don't close with 3 straight losses, 4 straight losses, I guess 2, then going into Clemson. Let's say they're 11-1 when they go to play Clemson. And a couple of snafus don't happen. Mac insists that was a fairly even game at the line of scrimmage. They just had a couple of miscues that turned into a bunch of points, which I can see that to a bit. But again, he's the master messenger, right? So if they're 11-1 going to play Clemson, they're possibly playing for a spot that maybe TCU got or something like that. I mean, they're in that conversation. Drake's in the Heisman conversation, but people didn't respect them because it wasn't a great schedule. In 2023, next fall, if they are in that same position, and let's say they're 11-1 with that schedule, that people are going to respect them.
Oh yeah.
Like, unless South Carolina is just awful and Minnesota is awful and stuff like that. But heading in, that shouldn't be the case. Heading in, those are 3 quality non-conference games, and then the Mercer thing won't help. It should never play Mercer. I think the ACC, if it wants to renegotiate its TV deal, by the way, and this is totally unrelated, but I'm going to say it now anyway, they need to go to a 9-game conference schedule, and they need to eliminate FCS games because they devalue the TV. So you do that alone right there, then Jim Phillips can go to ESPN and say, look, we've added a conference game. We've gotten rid of FCS games. We've just increased the value of our package. Let's renegotiate. The league should do that. Yeah. So, but I just don't like FCS
Campbell
games.
is their Mercer this year, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, I said Mercer.
You're good. You're good. I knew what you were referring to. The same.
Yeah, my bad. So I played Mercer a couple of years ago, and you shouldn't play them either. So
it's the same kind of comparison.
I think they're the same colors too. So
yeah, football stadium's probably very close to the same size.
Have I said Mercer a couple of times?
Yeah, a couple of times, but we knew what you meant.
Oh gosh, it's Campbell. So, duh. I got a basketball game later, so anyway, yeah, that's okay. So Campbell, the Fighting Campbells. Mm-hmm. When I was at basketball camp a long time ago up in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, they used to run a rebound drill that was a rebound drill, and it was from Campbell.
Really?
It was pulling the ball off that old little rebound thing way back in the day. This is old school, man, big time old school. And it was all
that's super random right there.
I used to think, boy, those Fighting Campbells are good rebounders.
It's the only thing you knew about them, probably. It's the only thing you knew about that university. Yeah, man. I agree. I think, again, I don't think they should ever play teams like that. I think it's just a waste of time, and I get why you do it. I can understand it in some ways, but I've always been on the same boat with you. I don't really think it's. The only reason they do it is so Campbell can get paid. I mean, that's really all it is.
They do it because it's easy win. They want to build depth. They want to get guys in the game.
Yeah, but playing Campbell's a lot different than playing Miami. You know what I mean? Or Syracuse.
I just don't think there's nothing to learn. They shouldn't charge regular prices for those games. We could have a whole podcast. Maybe we'll do it this offseason. We'll have a whole podcast about the 39 reasons AJ thinks that Power 5 should not play FCS schools. Yeah. I know the FCS people out there will hate me for it, but there's a reason James Madison jumped. There's a reason North Dakota State should jump, by the way, and South Dakota now.
Yeah.
Delaware is a program that should jump. A lot of these programs should just jump. Mm-hmm. Go FBS. Mm-hmm. Anyway, back to the Tar Heels.
Yeah, no, we could do a whole separate podcast on that. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's all I really want to say about the schedule. I think it's relatively favorable. I think some of the home games you're looking at, I mean, you got Duke at home, one of the better teams on your schedule. Miami's usually supposed to be. Who knows how good they'll be. You got them at home. UVA's a rivalry game. You got them at home. Syracuse, who knows how good they'll be. You got them at home. Even App State and Minnesota, 2 of your better teams you're playing, South Carolina included. You're not even having to go out of state for any of those games. So I think when you look at the home schedule compared to the away schedule, I really think it's a fine schedule. I don't necessarily agree with Mac Brown's comments. I don't think you necessarily do as well. Maybe there's something behind it that we don't know why he's saying it. I can't think of what that would be off the top of my head, because I think if anything, and I'm surprised he didn't come out and embrace it, because that's what we've seen from Mac. For him to come out, and when he made those comments, I was expecting them to, I'm like, okay, what is this? What are they playing? Clemson State, Florida State, back to back on the road. Like I didn't really see.
Well, we knew who they were going to play and where they were going to play, and we just didn't know what the order was. And I think that's what the issue was. Agreed. But it's challenging. But you know what? I think in year 5, given what he came back to do, I think it's perfect.
I do too.
And that's what I said in the column. That's what I said in my column. It's perfect. It's great. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
If you want to make a splash and you want to get respect, then face an opportunity like this as a schedule and then overcome it. Deal with it. Agreed.
Especially when you look at the roster and I think how good this team can be. I think it's a team that can win some of these games. It's going to be very hard to win some of these, at Clemson, at State, and, Minnesota, even, and South Carolina. Those are tough games. It's going to be hard for Carolina to win those, but the opportunity is there to do so. And if you
in year 5, they should. In year 5, they should.
And if you can win those games, AJ, then what kind of conversation are we going to be having next, November? You know what I mean? December. It's going to be a completely different vibe around the program. And if they don't win those games, then we'll have the conversation about, still not there and still not ready to beat these big time teams, which they have struggled to do since Mac Brown's come back. So big opportunities to do so.
And they've struggled to do it since he left the first.
That's a good point. Before Mac, they've struggled to do it 20.
They're much better situated to do it now than they were 4 years ago.
Oh God,
no doubt about
night
that.
and day. There's no doubt.
Which is why, before we're hammering this pretty hard, but that's why I think in year 4, maybe I wouldn't have thought so. Year 3, maybe not so. But in year 5, man, put them all out there.
Yeah.
Just hurdle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We'll obviously talk more about the schedule as we get closer to the season, but I think that's enough for it on this podcast. Real quickly, AJ, before we move on to Monday's press conference, talk about that a little more in depth. I want to talk about our sponsor on this podcast is MyPerfectFranchise.net, sponsored every single UNC football show we've had so far. I think we're on episode 20 or 21 at this point too. So big shout out to them for continuing to sponsor. So guys, looking to diversify, looking to leave the corporate rat race, gain control of your own income, schedule, career. What about having the ability to have unlimited PTO, create your own income and wealth? Well, look no further than MyPerfectFranchise.net. Andy Ludicky is a longtime Rivals member, diehard college football fan, and a franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses throughout his long career. So what he does is, for those interested in opening a franchise, there's so many different types of franchises you can open: restaurants, service industry. I mean, God, I could sit here and rattle it off forever. There's so many different franchises that you can open, and he helps you not only see if it's a right path for you, but if you do decide that you want to do it, he helps you along the process and helps you and shows you, guides you along the way of how to go about opening and managing a franchise. So guys, get in contact with them. Free consultation, 100% free consultation call process. He doesn't make any money unless you do decide to go about it and do it. If you just call him and talk to him, decide it's not right for you, he's not making a buck off that. So call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Again, it's 100% free. What do you really have to lose? Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. And if you do end up talking to him, you guys know what I'm going to say if you're a longtime UNC football show watcher. Make sure you talk to him about Mac Brown, massive Texas Longhorn fan. So obviously got a lot of love for Mac Brown, and make sure you let him know that TarHeelIllustrated.com sent you as well. Again, myperfectfranchise.net, link to that in the 2 podcasts that AJ did with Andy a couple months ago are in the description below if you want to learn more about it, because Andy can definitely describe it a heck of a lot better than I can. So check those podcasts out and check them out, myperfectfranchise.net. Big thank you for them continuing to sponsor the UNC Football Show. All right, AJ, I want to talk about Monday, talk about what happened on Monday, and just kind of get your insights and observations from the press conference. Obviously, a lot of coverage is already on our website. Check it out, TarHeelIllustrated.com, and the link below if you want to go read AJ's column from it and the reports from not only Mac Brown, but some of the transfers as well as Jason Jones. But you got to talk to every single transfer coming in, got to talk to Jason Jones, new cornerbacks coach for the Tar Heels, and obviously you got to talk about Mac as well. We'll hit on the spring game a little bit later, so let's leave that out of the discussion for this because that was obviously a big talking point about that. We'll kind of dive into that to wrap up the show. But what were your overall takeaways, mainly from just meeting Jason Jones, talking to him for the first time, and being able to kind of go around in almost an old school Larry Fedora-esque way where you kind of put the players in a chair and you just go one by one and talk to them? I like the format they did for that. What were your takeaways from kind of getting to talk to those guys and like I said, getting to talk to Jason Jones for the first time as Carolina's quarterbacks coach?
It's an interesting question because in a 20-minute press conference in which he was just getting to talk to us for the first time. He didn't know who we are. He didn't know who any of us are. We didn't know him. I guess if the term winning the press conference can be thrown out there, I would say that he didn't win or lose the press conference because it doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And that was interesting that some of the people that reached out to me reacted, well, there's not a lot of personality there. I said, well, the last guy had a ton of personality. He's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So what does that matter? He's a position coach. He's got a track record that at times is very good and at times it's not so good. But again, he's just a position coach. So when it has been really good, how much of that is on him? When it hasn't been really good and there have been struggles, how much of that is on him? There's all kinds of factors that go into it. I think basically what this is the trade-off was Dre had 4 years. And it was the first 4 years he was a coach. Mac even said he kind of threw him into it. And probably, I don't know if he said he shouldn't. He said he's got 4 years experience now. He emphasized Dre wants to maybe look at some other things. He's got 4 years of experience now. Jason has 20. And he's coached in the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10. Now he goes to the ACC. So whatever kind of trade-off people are looking for, you can't dispute the increase in experience, the increase in range of experiences as a coach. It's not just he's coached for 20 years, but he's worked for different people. He's been around different people. He's been in different schemes. He's been in different leagues, been in different schools. So he's someone who has adapted and adjusted. And in his last couple of stops, he did have FAU, I think, for a year, but at Ole Miss, he ascended to, I think, co-defensive coordinator. And in Indiana, he did something similar as well. He was there with Charlton Warren in 2020 or 21. In 20, during the COVID year, Indiana had one of the best defenses in the country. I think they were tied for the national lead in interceptions in 17 in a shortened season. So he had a couple of defenses at Ole Miss that were really, really good. And they were one among the leaders in interceptions. So I think that if you're going to hire a guy in January, that they probably did a pretty good job hiring him, although I suspect that the prior relationships were huge there, because I think he also spent some time with Sparky Woods way back when. So I think that a lot of people thought it was time for a change, so they made a change. And they brought in a guy who's been around a while. So that in and of itself suggests it should be an upgrade.
Max said it was the only guy he contacted too, right?
He was the only guy he spoke with. He said that he asked Gene and Charlton to come up with some names. They initially had 11, narrowed down to 3, and Jason was the only one of those 3 that Max spoke with. I don't think it would be wrong to assume that maybe Jason was the guy all along, and that's why Max spoke with him. You can say that there was this big search for somebody, and that doesn't always mean that I'm not saying that they didn't. I'm just saying that as soon as I learned who they were hiring, my first thought was, okay, well, this is something that was a seed that was planted a while ago at some point, which is okay, because coaches are always thinking about what if. Yeah. So, and that's not, Mac has acknowledged that about all position coaches. He's got, people always say, hey, the AD always has a list of 5 names in his drawer in case something happens. Well, coaches have that about every position.
Yeah, definitely.
But in this case, it's Gene's defense and Charlton's defense. He wanted them to sort of get to the point where Mac had to talk to somebody. And once he talked to Jason, he said, okay, this is going to work. So
it's a good way to go about it too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the no frills thing, the thing that I take from it more than anything is the messaging, the discipline of the message. You know, with college kids, college athletes, you've got to be very disciplined in the message as a coach. You can't steer a little bit right, a little bit left. You have to go right down the middle with your messaging at all times, because you're constantly harping on that message. And you want it to become part of their football DNA. And if you waver on message and when the message is delivered and all that kind of stuff, sometimes it's a little harder for it to become part of their football DNA. So my vibe that I got from Jason Jones is he's someone that's going to stay on message. He's going to be disciplined with his message, and he's going to be in concert with Charlton and with Gene. And I'm not saying that Dre wasn't, but perhaps it just wasn't a great fit in that group, because there has to be chemistry on the staff as well.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. What did you make of talking? You got to talk to all the transfers. Was there any, obviously we're not going to run through it because we could have a whole podcast about that, but anything that just maybe stood out from talking to certain guys, or any just takeaways you had from just kind of going around and chatting?
Yeah, maturity, and they were all articulate. Like they knew why they were there. So, and that's one of the cool things. I talked to someone at UNC afterward about how, boy, this was a pleasure. It was a pleasure getting to meet these kids. These are guys that, unlike young college athletes, they're sort of walking into this new world. It's like Oz, whereas they wake up and everything's in color, and they have all these trinkets around and bells and whistles, and they're just beginning their journey. These are guys that have been through the journey, and they're not really in awe about being at North Carolina. Elijah Huzzy was at East Tennessee State. He's not in awe about being at North Carolina. Tez Walker grew up in Charlotte, went to Central for a minute, and then ended up at Kent State because of COVID. Now he's back. He's in North Carolina. Never thought about going to North Carolina. I never looked at him when he was in high school, and here he is. It's his journey. They each have individual stories about how they got here and why they're there, which I think makes them more interesting. So we can look back at what they did their previous stops, and then why they're here. And I think each of the 9 feature stories I'm going to write on these kids is going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. And they all have unique stories, but they all have a similar mission too. Mm-hmm. Like they want to get to the NFL. Mm-hmm. They want to win at this level. They want to get to the NFL. Some of them were more precise in articulating that than others. Amari Gaynor came from Florida State. Why North Carolina? Well, the jack position. I think I can get the NFL playing jack. And I asked him, I said, did they splice up Noah Taylor clips and send them to you and saying, this is your role. This is what you would do. He said, yeah, him and Kaden. Mm-hmm. So it was very specified. They knew a lot about these kids because the video clearly doesn't lie in college. It can be a little misleading in high school. If you go look at huddle videos and stuff like that. College, it is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so the kids all saw their schemes, what they would do, and the coaching staff saw what these kids can do on film. Some of them they saw in person. Armani Chapman, coming from Virginia Tech, I said, you played at a program that the fans around here despise. And in the end, and this is the change in college sports now that I find very fascinating. And perhaps maybe we start handling college athletes a little bit different from a media perspective, but these were business decisions.
Yeah, no doubt.
For 9 kids.
No doubt.
Amari is like straight up. Yeah. I said, you're a Florida State guy. Dad played there. You played there. I mean, I imagine the fight song just runs through your blood, and now you're playing at a school that they played a couple of years ago, back-to-back years, and could meet this year later on. You never know. Mm-hmm. And I said, is this sort of your bridge from FSU to the NFL? You get that year to refine and make yourself more of an NFL player? Yes. So I think that's fascinating. These are mature kids. They most of them have degrees. I don't know how many. I'd have to look into it. Maybe all of them have degrees. They came to North Carolina to play right away and enhance their stock. I think maybe a couple of them might not be thinking as much NFL as they are just about, hey, it's a great place for grad school.
Yeah, education.
In Derek Allen's case, I would have spent a year with my brother, playing with him, Marcus Allen. The Australian punter, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that was a great interview. Yeah.
He was asked about, well, have you ever put on the pads? You see, yeah, they used to put us in pads, just the way the terminology, used to put us in pads in Australia some. Mm-hmm. So you had to kick in pads to show the American coaches you could actually kick some, because it is.
He was still learning the rules too, which was interesting.
He doesn't know the rules at all.
Yeah, he's like, I don't really know. I can kick. I know the rules with that, but I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, he has no clue what's going on out there.
Yeah, so that's fascinating.
Yeah. Intentional grounding will shock him when he figures that out. Mm-hmm. I think Ryan Coe's story was really interesting. Blew me away. And again, this is why in-person interviews are so valuable, because stuff just comes up. He was probably going to Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. He was there the weekend Mike Leach had his incident, his heart attack. Yeah. Whatever. I guess it was a heart attack.
Yeah, heart attack.
He says he was the last recruit in Mike Leach's office before he died. And Mike Leach dying and the uncertainty, and he had to find a school, is a big reason why he chose North Carolina. Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, that's a fascinating story. You can see all these interviews on our YouTube channel as well. So go check all these out. But that's fascinating, man. I mean, and that's the stuff you don't get over Zoom. You're not getting that over Zoom, probably. You know what I mean?
I talked to Willie Lampkin, the kid from Coastal Carolina, about his height, about his size, and gives him a little chip. And he said, I look at my size as an advantage. I mean, when you're an offensive lineman, you want to get low and you want to essentially, theoretically, if you can lift up the defensive lineman, that means you can sort of move them wherever you want to move them, right?
Yeah.
And one of the struggles that some long offensive linemen have when they first get to college, it takes a while, is getting their pad level low enough in order to lift and move, to control the defensive lineman. Well, if you're 6 feet, you're kind of already there going up against 6'3" and 6'4" guys. So he sees that as a plus. We'll see. I think that he probably didn't expect Montilus to come back and play this year, but maybe Montilus will serve in a Brian Anderson kind of role.
Yeah.
Where Brian was insurance and Ed just wants to be a part of things. So maybe Lampkin will get the start. I think that the fact that he can play center if something happens to Corey Gaynor is huge, because he played the entire season at center this past year at Coastal and was all Sun Belt. He said he'd rather play guard because center's just harder.
Yeah.
So most guys would rather play guard. So I like the group. They're mature. They all have interesting stories. I think they add to that room. I think that that Carolina upgraded based on what went and what came in. No doubt that there was an upgrade.
Yeah.
And I also think the fresh start and guys who are on a mission. You got 9 dudes who came in, and the DB from Georgia State won't enroll till the spring, late spring, early summer. So we won't talk to him until then. But you've got fresh blood in the program, experienced fresh blood, guys that want to win. And it reflects how Mac has changed and how he went about the portal. Initially, he said, I'm just going to get guys that can come in and start right away. But not all 9 of these guys are going to start.
No.
Some of them might be special teams players and backups in the secondary, as an example. And that's okay. I think they're okay with that. Because like I said, some of them I think are there for grad school as well. So I think it's good. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk to these kids. I'm so glad we had the format that you alluded to. It allowed a lot of good stuff to come out and get us a much better understanding of what these kids are all about. And I think North Carolina made a significant upgrade in the portal. Yeah, I think all these kids are going to help in some capacity. Some are going to help a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And there's no doubt about it. We talked about that in our last football show too, but I think after watching the interviews, kind of diving a little bit more into their history and experience and maturity, I think it's super evident that Carolina upgraded and filled a lot of needs, not only starting wise, but depth wise as well, which is obviously big too, because it feeds into special teams and feeds into the culture of the team and the competition between places. That's what you want. And when you've got a lot of experienced guys in different groups, breeds competition, and it just makes everybody better. So I think it's a big positive. Last thing, AJ, before we wrap this one up, announced spring practice starts March 5th, spring game April 15th. Still, according to Max, still not really sure. We've talked about this in a previous show too, a couple months ago maybe. Still not exactly sure what the format's going to look like with that spring game. Still trying to kind of figure that out. If it's going to be like it usually is, maybe something a little bit different. But I mean, February 1st today, man, we're not too far away from the start of spring practice. Felt like football season ended yesterday, but just overall takeaways from that, it'll be interesting to kind of see and watch this team during the spring, but it'll also be kind of interesting to see how the format of the spring game is, because you don't really get a lot out of the spring game, but it is always good to be able to get out there and see the team and kind of see what they may look like going into next season.
From the time that we're recording this, the spring practice starts in 33 days.
Yeah.
And the bowl game was, 35 days ago.
And no off days in football, man. It's 365.
It really is.
They only play 12 games, 14 if you're really good, but it's 365.
Yes, it is.
15 if you're really good, I should say. If you're really, really good.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's a lot. But not complaining.
Yeah.
I could do something. I used to have a regular job in the computer industry before I started doing this, and I wouldn't go back to that for all the tea and chai.
I can't see you in that industry. No, I definitely can't.
Yeah, for all the oil we can drill from the core of the earth, I wouldn't go back and do that for that. I wouldn't go back and do it for a Hans Wagner card. How about that?
Yeah, that's out of your house right there. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, I wouldn't do that. March 5th, they start the day after the Duke basketball game. They practice for a week, and then they're off for spring break. They come back, and the spring game is April 15th. They're still looking at options, what to do with that. Mac was talking to us a little bit before the press conference started about it and how we're going to work out access. I think it's good for us in the media that last year the spring game was a Saturday after the national championship. in basketball. So we didn't get a lot of time to see them in the spring. And it was sort of anticlimactic in a lot of ways.
It's almost like it never happened last year in some ways.
Yeah, now it's almost 2 weeks after, and who knows, maybe Carolina's season in basketball ends a lot sooner than that this coming season. But I think it gives football a chance to have a little bit more prime spot on the schedule. And I think middle of April is pretty ideal for a spring game anyway. Mm-hmm. I think they'll do something clever, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do something to incorporate the fans. I know that I told Mac, I said, I thought that what they did the second practice last year when it was open to the public was awesome. A wonderful thing.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing they were able to do. Now, being the spring game, if they did something similar to that, the guys won't be just in shorts. Mm-hmm. They'll be in full pads. So they could do some drills. They could do some real hitting. They could do a little bit of 11 on 11, a little 7 on 7. They could do a lot of different things that the fans could come in and see. Mm-hmm. And instead of doing a full-on scrimmage. And the reason it might not be a full-on game is because everyone's going away from it. They don't want to get hurt.
Yeah.
They don't hit in college football like they used to. Mm-hmm. They don't hit like we did in high school. No. It's just they don't hit that much anymore, and they want to keep guys healthy. I'm not sure. I talked to a former player, 3 weeks ago, who said that he thinks that hitting a lot prevents injuries.
Yeah, I could see that. I can see it both ways.
Because you have to learn how to take a blow.
There's a proper form to it and getting used to it and making sure you just gotten the technique to do it properly. You can get hurt if you don't tackle somebody the right way, You can really hurt. Yeah,
it's like I see tackling drills a lot of times, but they're just drills and they don't really tackle. Mm-hmm. They need to run the nutcracker and just tackle.
Yeah, no doubt.
Run the nutcracker and just tackle properly. And the way you can run around and do it. And I'm not saying that they don't. They obviously hit. They hit a lot, but so much of it's skill-oriented now. Mm-hmm. And then I have a spring game and I'm okay with that, by the way. I've covered a ridiculous number of spring games in my life from a bunch of different schools. And every one of them, there's a guy who stands out that you never, ever hear his name
every single time. I've covered
so I don't know how much value there is to it.
I don't think there is a lot, to be honest with you. I mean, they're really, from a media perspective, you can get some good video clips of guys and photos, which is great moving forward. But besides that, a lot of the stuff you see in there it just doesn't translate to the season. Very rarely does it translate to the season.
Do a bunch of drills, invite fans on the field for autographs afterward. Yeah. Do a bunch of giveaways, incorporate, the players into the fans with some of the giveaways and make it very interactive. And you can get a decent number of people in there.
Yeah, no doubt.
If you can get 17,000, 18,000 in there, I think that would be a success. But they don't. Other than that one year when I was on ESPN when Butch was there, they had 30,000 for the spring game. Mm-hmm. Usually they're in about the 8,000 to 12,000 range at best.
You don't get a lot when it's just a game, yeah.
And I think they should do more than that. I think that they should do a lot more than that and make it super interactive and just try to generate good vibes with the fan base. That's what I would do.
Agreed. I think that's exactly what they'll, and I'm, knowing Mac and the staff he has and just the behind the scenes guys, I think they will do something very smart, kind of centered around that. That just sounds on brand for them. They've been pretty good about kind of thinking of ways to involve fans and other things like that. So I think
let us on the field so you can get a bunch of great videos for us and Kevin can get a bunch of great photos and
it's huge.
And I can walk around into the different position groups and watch them do stuff. And
it's huge, man. I got so much. We've had a few open practices in the last couple of years, and you just get so much more out of that than you ever do a spring game. You just do. You can go to open practice for an hour instead of a 2-hour spring game, and you'll get more than you'd ever get in that spring game. You just do. It's just a fact. You know what I mean?
You have never said anything more absolute than that.
Yeah.
That is it right there.
Those open practices are so valuable from a media perspective.
I love it.
It's unbelievable. So hopefully we'll have a few more of those next year as well. And I'm sure we will. Well, not next year, in a month or so, but I'm sure we will. But yeah, man, I think that's a good place to wrap this one up. We'll obviously, if any news breaks on the spring game and develops on that, and all your coverage from spring practice will be on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And it's a great time to sign up. Just $8.33 a month, become a premium member, premium subscriber, and become a Carolina Insider 2. Link in the description to our website is below. And again, great time to do so. Spring practice not too far away. Basketball season in full swing. I mean, in a month from now, we'll be in the overlap again. So keep it locked to Tar Heel Illustrated. I know AJ's laughing
Please
over there.
remind me of that.
Yeah. Got a little PTSD thinking about that probably. But yeah, we're not too far away from the overlap again. So keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Keep it locked to our YouTube channel. Again, if you want to watch the interviews that we talked about from the transfers, go check it out on our YouTube channel as well. And just click on our channel icon below and you'll find all the videos that were uploaded just a couple days ago. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Big thank you to myperfectfranchise.net. Check out the podcast and check them out at myperfectfranchise.net. Links are below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you know every single time we upload. See you all in the next one. Thanks.